Welcome to Conversations for Our Time with John, George, and myself, Joe. Our podcasts are for people who want to expand their knowledge on the way this world works. Today's podcast is our first ever one, and we'll be talking about the grand solar minimum, Covid-19 psychology, and the nature of things.
The human mind is so complicated because a lot of people will put all their focus into a particular thing, yeah, and they'll make that their life. And it's very difficult to be balanced and not be sucked into, oh, I need to be this way, or I need to do this, or etc. etc.
It's interesting how you change your mindset over the years. I mean, certainly me and John have talked about it at length about how we figured that something's been desperately wrong with this world. It's a strange concept to think, like John's been talking about the psychology of it and how some people see it and how some people don't. But we are programmed from birth, and
it's heavy programmed.
Yeah, it's hard to stay an adventurer in life.
Oh, funny enough, I wrote about this in my blog. Sorry to cut in, but it's really interesting because I wrote about the fact that, like, the nature of things. Because when we're kids, we're pure human beings. It's not until we enter the education system that it starts getting knocked out of us. And actually it's when you start to go to senior school that real programming starts, because you're then being prepared to be an adult. That's the point of it, isn't it? Is to prepare you for work, education or work. Most of those things are just distractions, essentially. Because when you say this to people are like, "Oh, what do you expect us? Like, we're all going to fucking go and live in the forest and shit like that."
Yeah, I love
because
that.
that's what people's reaction is because when you try and present them with a different alternative, their fear state will always try and make a joke of, but belittle what you're trying to say, because they can't entertain it in their mind. It's like people call you a conspiracy theorist. Well, why don't you just listen to what I've got to say? Because
and go and research it for yourself.
Yeah, because don't you see that just by believing everything that you're told, you're not being you. You're just passive. Like, what? How can you take that? It's when you question shit in school. I remember, like, asking questions, and certain teachers would just be like, "Oh, no," and you're like, "Well, yeah, but hang on."
You just challenge his belief system.
I'm not challenging you. I'm trying to understand what this is, what relevance it has to me.
When you ask a question, it throws them. They're like, just fucking accept my answer. That's what they want.
Because teachers aren't taught to have dialogue. They're taught to teach. They're two different things. Like, someone who actually engages with people, engages with them. It's an organic thing. It's just like a conversation, isn't it? One thing I learned through my study of trying to understand the universe, the world, humanity, why things are the way they are, is I found, like, naturally I've become an observer. When I started practicing Buddhism, it was quite interesting because I used to observe a lot of things, especially like nature and things like that. When I started to practice Buddhism, it's an interesting thing because I started to observe my own mind and how I reacted to things and how it made me feel. I was writing about this in the blog about responsibility, and if you break down responsibility, it's a response to something, and a response is very different from a reaction, because a reaction is like, you can have this reaction which isn't observed in your mind, and therefore the outcome will always be something you can't control because it comes from an emotional state. An emotion should drive our actions, but the actions we take should be governed by our wisdom and our experience, because that's how we, like, grow as a human being, right? And it's quite interesting to see this. So you then, for me, to take my ego out of anything is really difficult. When you're having a conversation with someone, if you want to talk about something like GSM, and how do you actually approach that subject? You have to become a master of conversation, really.
And trying to connection is such a different thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and
but following on from what you said about being an observer, I think whether consciousness or an awareness of consciousness occurs first, or you're an observer first, perhaps you start to observe and see things in the world. What that enables you to do over time is, instead of just being an observer, as you gain and increase that knowledge, you feel empowered by it.
Definitely. Well, that's where freedom of choice comes in, right? Because you can only have freedom of choice if you're conscious. Because otherwise, how do you know you're doing something you don't really want to be doing?
Until you're aware of it, then you can take control of that information or whatever's going in. And it is about being conscious, it's about being aware. But people go through their whole lives not realising this.
Yeah, I think also as well, it's important to be aware in blatant terms who the enemy is. I always look at adverts and I'm like, especially the stuff that's going on at the moment, you're like, well, how are they programming people? Exactly what are the methods they're using? I can see it unfolding. It's even to the point, I mean, when this whole lockdown thing happened, I was walking along and someone actually walked into the road with an oncoming car to avoid me, to stay those 2 meters apart. So they put their life at risk to avoid a virus.
It's scary. It's scary to see when you know all this stuff. When you know, it's scary to look around you and you can see what level that these people are programmed. It's so deep, and we've had deep conversations about this, all us three. Maybe there's something more, but when you see it, it is like, man, you've come a long way from the deprogram. You see it in someone else that is so bad, and you just can't do anything but feel sorry for them because they don't know.
Yeah, we're only just starting to really understand what the universe is, how it's made up, how it communicates, because it is just one big circuit, electrical circuit essentially. And how do we fit into that? A forest or something like that. I went to the New Forest recently, and as soon as you step in, there's something magical about the place. Like you can feel, these are the types of things that can actually deprogram you, because when you have that type of connection, you're far less likely to want to take the road that's been laid out of transhumanism, which is this kind of insane addiction to digital technology and things that just seem to be artificial. Things have their place because everything is advancement, but it's about who has the power, essentially, isn't it? And who controls the narrative and the direction.
Yeah. People don't recognise they have the power within themselves.
Exactly.
They've got too many distractions. You know,
but it's a necessity.
It's a necessity at some point, but it is literally taking people's lives. I mean, going back to the whole going on that bushcrafting course that weekend, you know, when you're lying down in a hammock and at night, there is a massive presence of something, and that thing is nature. And that connectivity with nature is just something money cannot buy. I'm lucky that I found that, you know, and people around the world have not got that connectivity with nature. It's sad to see. There's nothing more powerful. That thing brings children into the world. But I just feel like people are missing out on this most magnificent journey, but they're missing out because they've got too many of these distractions, whether it's sport or it's fucking politics. I just think they're missing out so much. It's actually sad to watch. Society,
it is, you know, we've been distracted our entire life. Really, to understand the world, you have to throw out all that programming and start again.
You do.
Well, it's the willingness to unlearn what you've been taught and then re-educate yourself.
Nobody wants to put their hand up and say, I've been lied to.
This is
Who
it.
wants to do that?
I think it's interesting because I think everyone needs different experiences to help them come to this conclusion of everything we see isn't real. Because I thought about this the other day. Like I got locked out of my flat, so I was waiting for my flatmate to come home, and I was looking up at the stars, and I just had this moment of contemplation, which was like what it is to be human. I mean, it perplexes me. It perplexes me, like to the degree where I'm like, I mean, obviously I believe in karma and reincarnation and things like this, but so that's my opinion. But I believe to be born a human being and have the gifts that we do. is a gift in itself, and actually how we use our lives is really important. And nobody's perfect, but we all have our own individual battles. But actually, it's always about what's the battle within here rather than anywhere out there, because there's a saying in Buddhism which is, there's no heaven or hell rests in one's heart. And that's truth, because actually this is where hell can be on earth.
Your own hell.
But if you raise your mental state and you continue to train your mind every day, you're able to change that into what they call the Saha world, which is human realm. I find it quite interesting because actually it is a state of mind. Because people have survived insane things and they've come out even stronger because of that experience. So I think, though, while the time we live in now, and obviously we've got Covid-19 84 happening on our doorstep, everyone's doorstep, but we've got something bigger afoot. Grand solar minimum. Kind of explain in as much detail without being too overwhelming how this actually takes place and what are the processes.
It's a massive subject. But to be blunt, the first one we got to say is that the global warming theory is what the society have been fed.
Well, the anthropological global warming agenda is just that.
Yeah.
Well, there's no science. The issue is this has been created as a narrative to blame humanity for the way we live, essentially.
That's it. That's the crux of it.
That's kind of like the psychological process behind it. Because how do you lead or direct an entire globe? You have to create off of natural cycles, because there always has to be some kind of truth in a lie. I mean,
same old story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if it's climate change or COVID-19, if we look at global warming, or as they now call it, climate change, because they change it from global warming to climate change because there's too much evidence coming out, so they had to slightly change the idea of it. Yeah, so they still keep the public ill-informed. Again, psychology. It's all psychology.
And one big massive mind control operation.
But you can look at part of education, because it doesn't actually really teach us to be true scientists or explorers. Because if we were, more people would be researching this and questioning it. We're going back to what we were talking about before, and we only can have responsibility for what we do. We're all programmed from birth or from education, but essentially there does come a time in everyone's life when they have to question. I'm pretty sure there comes a time in everyone's life where they question what's happening, but it's embracing that and continuing to try and seek the truth. It's a very, very difficult thing. And then when you come into touch with something like grand solar minimum, everything else is dispelled to a degree, because you realise that actually it's all bullshit. The point is, this global warming thing is created to tax people more money, to take away more of their freedoms, to further take away their humanity, and to allow those who are already rich, powerful and influential to become even more so. And that the very creations of such organisations, international organisations, are a free ride for all those that want to get money, or gain extra power. And just look at things like the World Economic Forum. What does that even mean? The World Economic Forum. It's a bunch of people that have very powerful positions that get to decide the way the economy moves in the future. They have more power than the government. The government are elected through lies and deception, but organisations such as those are set up already based on deception to create an illusion that these organisations are created for the benefit of human beings.
There's a lot of people that are aware that the global warming is essentially a hoax, but that's just halfway there. There is something happening, and you're right. We have to approach the subject in a delicate kind of way without giving people no hope or anything like that. I don't want people to feel helpless. there's a lot that's happening. There's a lot we can do about it, and there's still time. But people have got to take on board what is happening, what the real climate change is, and the fact that the Earth is cooling. There is nothing on this planet that is stronger than the sun. It drives our climate. We cannot control that sun. There's no way that we can, and we just need to flip
It's
what
stupid
they've
to
done.
think so.
I know.
I wanted to say as well, I think it's quite important for everyone to know that none of us are scientists. But anyone can be a scientist, because we all are naturally curious human beings, and we can work out things. You know, when you throw a ball, you're practicing physics. If you're trying to hit a target, you're practicing physics. There's all sorts of things if you really break down. So I think it's quite important to know that, but also that we're all very passionate about knowledge, understanding, seeking the truth. And we're not truthers, we're just three normal people that are trying to work out what's going on, and especially why things are being done the way they are at the moment. And this probably led us to GSM. So the science behind it is incredible. The depth of studies into it is pretty big, isn't it? But also, you know, we're not just talking in one field. We're talking about paleoclimatologists, geologists, astrophysicists. There's lots of different people in different disciplines. The issue that we face is that they're all funded. Academia and scientific institutions, especially in America and the UK, are funded by people like Bill Gates. And not just Bill Gates, there's lots of other people, but to research particular subjects, particular fields. But the point is a lot of these studies are ignored, and even if you look at people like Piers Corbyn with decades of experience, been arrested for just trying to say that, you know, people have a right to be free, essentially. So I think the important thing is that there's so much data and science behind this, and we will post links on all future podcasts. But the point is we want people to understand that anyone can research this.
Yeah.
All you need to do is you just need to be brave, but you can't get your information just through one source. You have to go looking, and this is the point of any knowledge. Knowledge isn't just taught to you. You have to seek knowledge. Information is taught to you, and usually, as we all know, most people might have had this experience, that our education system is shot, and therefore we've all educated ourselves.
Because people got to understand, right? I mean, this is nothing new to Earth. This is really important for me to say this. This is nothing new to Earth, what's happening. Earth's been through it time and time again, right? It's new, and for us, it's the first time it's happening to us.
I think it's quite important that whenever you're looking into something as huge or as cosmic as this, is that the information is kind of scattered about.
It is.
And I suppose this is, you know, Joe did. I mean, I've had it quite easy in regards to learning, because Joe obviously did most of the legwork because he knew about it before us.
Well, that's
I'm privileged to know about it, because
it
now everything makes sense. I've turned into a researcher for the last 2 years, well, year fully, and especially recently, it's even more important, because I think something that is important mentioning is when you go into a grand solar minimum, one, we don't know necessarily what we're entering, but we do have historical events or historical records. So we do know to a degree, and even if we look at historical events, we can see correlation with certain things happening, like civilizations rising and falling, and what the sun is doing at that point. So I think the point is what have all these civilizations faced? If you just knew about ground solar minimum, right? I mean, it's one thing, but when you know the effect it can have on the planet. Because when I found out about it, so I was like, fucking hell, this is well interesting. And then I was like, then I started watching Ice Age Farm. I was like, yeah, it's a little bit fucking harsh, because actually we're pretty dependent on the sun being fucking at a constant level.
The truth, isn't it?
Yeah. So really, you know, where it hit home with me was when you go into a ground solar minimum, the food growing system that you rely on is essentially, it's potentially going to crumble.
And this is what we need to touch on.
And this is really actually the most important and it's the priority that you need to look at. And I've started growing my own food properly based on what I found out.
And I think that is good, because you're taking back your own power.
It is.
And then this is what we want to encourage people to do as well, is to take back your own power.
Exactly.
There's too much dependability on the government, and people don't even know what's around the corner. It's all about preparation. But yeah, the food thing is, I've been properly starting to learn grow food. I think this was the proper season for me. I started last year, but it's taking back that power. Once we grow our own food and find different ways of growing food, because at some point we're not going to be able to grow the food the traditional way that we've been growing. There's stuff you can grow in 7 to 10 days, which we'll talk about, microgreens. You can grow sprouting as well, which will all help. You might want to grow what you can in the summertime and store whatever you can, but we can still potentially thrive.
So it's a really interesting concept, isn't it? And I've been writing blogs about this, or articles. How we've just drifted away from our nature. How you're talking like regain your power, but how have we lost it? How have we, we have so much power when we're kids. The influence we have when we're kids is fucking phenomenal. And the curiosity and the willingness to just want to go on adventures, and over time we lose this. And this is why it's very hard it would be very hard for some people to accept about GSM. So we're entering a time now where what we're doing, because as I said, we're not professionals, we're not experts, we're not scientists, but I think that we feel that we can help wake up other people, or give the knowledge of this amazing subject of GSM to people.
We are, when it's coming with growing food, we're not going to be able to grow food the way that we have, so it's pretty scary. So you've got to come up with new ideas. We've got to kind of warn people.
Yeah, I mean, this is what it comes down to, isn't it? Is that actually all we're trying to do is empower people to take their life back. That's it. And then what they do is up to them. We have technology now, and we didn't have that before. And we have a lot more knowledge about growing food. Even though less people grow food, there's more knowledge on the internet. You can teach yourself to grow food within a couple of months. So for the folks hopefully listening at some point, microgreens, 7 to 14 days. It's like 20 grams or 23 grams I think we use. You're going to get about 200 grams worth of microgreens. So all you need is some kind of medium to grow it in. But that can be grown on a window ledge.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can grow sprouting seeds, which are even easier. You can grow them in a jar.
They take a bit longer, don't they?
But you mentioned hydroponics and aquaponics. You can do that in. Then get a polytunnel and grow food, because you can grow all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
And the best thing about growing food for me is my connection to digging with my bare hands, because I think humans were made to touch the bare earth.
So nice to do.
There's so much science behind. There's a lot of science coming out now about the link between our own gut biome and the soil biome. Most of the soil that our food is grown in is so depleted of natural things like nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. This is the cause to a lot of illnesses that are taking place. Plus all the pesticides and all that shit is sprayed on it. But if you can grow your own, you have complete control. And also it empowers you, and especially the events that are coming now, everyone has to grow. Everyone has to grow food, no matter how small amount. This is the seriousness of it, but it's getting it across to people in a way that it's a joy to grow food.
It's a pleasure,
but it's also necessary. To know about this is a blessing, because it can help you prepare. But it's also a bit of a curse, because you become a bit of an outcast. You can't help it, because you try and talk to a lot of people about this, and they can't accept it because it's too big of a subject. And that's not to belittle anyone. It's just that I think you need a certain type of mind to be able to accept something like this and not be too overwhelmed by it. I mean, we're all getting overwhelmed, especially with everything that's going on now.
I think there's no gentle way to approach this, and you just got to say it. And sometimes you got to be blunt and say, look, this is what's happening. But I think people shut it down, and the reason why they shut it down, I think, because I thought about this a lot, really hard. I thought about this. because they feel something so powerful is out of their hands. But really, it's not too far out of their hands if they took control of the
but
situation.
It's because we've been taught
course,
that we aren't powerful. You can't possibly block. I know it's easy to block stuff out of your head, but when it comes to what's happening now is the only chance that any of these people on the planet have to stand up. It's the only chance we've got to stand up, because if we don't stand up now, you won't be able to stand up, because they would have taken the freedoms away that allow you to stand up at this particular point.